These are the secrets hidden inside of Minecraft that you maybe missed. What would happen if you took the new Windburst enchantment that you can put on the maces, and through the help of commands or NBT Explorer, bring that level all the way up to 100? Well, perhaps surprisingly, it's not just 100 times stronger than level 3. It's so much worse. As Phoenix SC shows off in this video, if you use a wind charge to get the initial burst and then use wind burst level 100, you can shoot yourself up over 1,300 blocks. But at that point, you gotta remember that when you do come back down to the ground, you are still gonna take fall damage. Oh, and also, don't set it over 256, since at that point, Minecraft just completely disables the enchantment, and it's like your mace isn't even enchanted. Fighting a wither while in the sky is probably one of the hardest things you can do. At the very least, it's the most annoying. And anyone who's had the misfortune of killing one of these things using an elytra knows that once you get it up into the sky, it's very hard to get it back down to the ground. However, taking after this example from 8 Mr. James, we can see that with the help of the mace, we're actually able to make this fight a lot more impressive when you take to the skies. Since here, using a combination of Windburst 3 and Density 5, we can continue to launch ourselves off of the wither and then hit it for even more damage when we come back down. In this example, they beat it in 5 hits. And that's with no strength potion or anything crazy, that's literally just the enchantments that you're seeing here on the mace. And what I love about doing it this way is that even if you go up into the sky, it's still a melee option, you're gonna be able to kill it through both phases. Very nicely done. Have you ever seen this block? Well, if you have, you're usually not doing something that you're supposed to. But that's okay, I don't like doing what I'm supposed to in games either. Read the channel name. So if you're like us rule breakers and you downgraded your world back to an older version, and then if there was a place where a new block data was supposed to be that didn't exist in older code, it would get replaced by this update block. So say you were to use an observer and then go back into a version before observers exist, it would be filled with this placeholder block. And for some reason, Mojang decided to update the texture of the update block, which I have to agree with this comment here saying that it looks like a poor man's version of a lucky block, but the original was also very tough to read, so I prefer this over the other alternative. If you haven't yet gotten the whole pack achievement in Minecraft, you might want to reconsider. Since we can see from this example laid out by Bruno Goldberg Pharaoh, if we were to take a pack of armored wolves, 19 to be exact, and put them against the warden, then that's all it takes to be able to kill the toughest mob in the game. I mean, you're gonna lose approximately 18 wolves in the process, so don't grow too attached. But with how easy it is to breed dogs and then get them all into this armor anyway, this could be one solution to keep yourself safe. I mean, make sure the dogs are being quiet, because otherwise if you spawn a second warden, 19's not gonna be enough for you. When we think of an automatic crop farm in Minecraft, we're usually thinking of 2 things. Either a nano farm using a bunch of dispensers with bone meal, or this version using farmer villagers to do the work. But if you want to make an easy to build semi-automatic crop farm, then all you need is a few leads and a few bees. Since by just dragging along a couple of bees over a field of crops like this, you can get them to pollinate exactly where you want. And as you can see from this example, you can very quickly grow up all of your crops just by doing a few laps like this. And especially when you're starting out and bone meal is not easy to come by, this is a solid solution if you don't have time on your hands. Just make sure you don't accidentally hit one of the bees when you're breaking the crops. Here's how we made a working end ship inside of Minecraft. Since if you were to play the potato snapshot for Minecraft's April Fool's update, and then replace this strip of obsidian inside of the end ship with a bunch of the flotator blocks, then all it takes is powering it with redstone, and we'll be able to power that entire end ship across the outer end islands. And as someone who's traveled the end using a flying machine before, I much prefer this. If you didn't know, there are hidden emojis that you're able to type on top of Minecraft signs. And while all those are great, there is a new one that's even more secret than those. As some users found out, if you were to go inside of the potato snapshot for Minecraft's April Fools, then by putting down a potato emoji, it would give you a potato emote inside of any text box. And while it doesn't look like much when it's just the regular sign color like this, if you were to give it a dye and a glow ink sac, then all of a sudden it actually looks like a poisonous potato that's animated. If the mace is supposed to launch you every time that you click with it, then what would happen if you spam clicked a mace in Minecraft? Well, using the help of an auto clicker, if we position ourselves just right on top of something like an iron golem, then we're not exactly gonna launch off of this thing, but instead just whittle down the iron golem with a whole bunch of particles. I kinda love it, honestly. It looks like we're digging straight down through an iron golem, which sounds like you're breaking 2 Minecraft rules at once, but when it looks this cool, I think you're safe. Minecraft's banner patterns just got so much weirder, since now we're actually able to set it up with custom banner patterns inside of the game's files. And with that it was only a matter of time before people found out how to animate that through the use of command blocks, and then once they animate something, they have to animate Bad Apple. So we got this example by Joe Fly 2009. And now, as the comments point out, it's only going to be a matter of time before someone figures out how to run Doom on these things. So whether it's Seth Bling or one of the other Minecraft geniuses, I can't wait to see it. This miniature build looks like it's modded, but it's entirely vanilla. And the reason for that is that we're able to use the block display command to make tiny versions of blocks that we can then use to build. And even cooler, there's a plugin that exists that allows you to take your builds and then make them into miniatures simply. Because otherwise having to go in and type in the relative positions of all these inside of a command block just sounds way less fun than actual building. And partnering this with the ability to change your scale in recent updates, I think that's all the resources we need to make a very fun Minecraft map. Some Minecraft blocks don't always look shorter, but they actually are in the hitbox. A good example of this is why we use mud instead of sugarcane farms, because even though mud and sand next together looks the same, if you stand on mud, you sink a pixel lower. And it turns out the cactus is another one of those blocks. And here I love the way that the Conester demonstrated this. For one, the armor stand doesn't seem to mind standing on top of the cactus, but it also gives that perfect distinction of how this hitbox works. Good stuff. Forget using slime blocks in your redstone, now you're gonna want to use potatoes. Since the flotator that we saw in the April Fool's snapshot allows us to make seamless redstone doors the likes of which has never been possible. And this example in particular really shows that off. At the very least, it's fun to play around with in an April Fool's joke. We used to have to combine our slabs at the world border, but now we could do it anywhere in your world. Only for a brief second though. Since by putting a top slab on one flotator and another bottom slab on the other, we can power both at the same time and push them right into lock for a brief second, giving us the combined slab. Although unfortunately the flotators will just fly through each other, so nothing good's meant to last, and maybe that's also true when this is an April Fool's update only added for one day to the game. This isn't a normal piston, it's a mutated one. Or at least that's what you'd be led to believe when you see this glitch. See, what's happening is that as we break the pistons when they're still powered, the piston head doesn't disappear at the same time as the piston body. So if you're able to place down a new piston that's powered right in the same area, then that piston head thinks that it still has a body, and now we've got two piston heads that are connected to the same center point. And something I'm sad isn't in the full game. When you put a white tulip in a crafting table, what do you get? Well, it's easy to say white dye. The truth is never as easy as it seems. Since in reality, you're actually going to get the light gray dye instead. And the reason for this is that when Mojang added in the white tulip, there wasn't a white dye to actually craft into. It was back when we had to use bone meal to dye our stuff. So to keep these flowers from breaking down into bone paste, we got this alternative instead. But now that a white dye actually does exist, I don't get why they wouldn't change the crafting recipe, or change the name of the flower. If you want it to be light gray dye, it's a light gray tulip in my eyes. In the trailer for the Village and Pillage update, we can see a villager holding a golden pick, which isn't an item that they're going to use, but then also grinding it against a grindstone like you would if it was an actual item. And stranger still, this is a nitwit villager, which are famous for doing not much of anything. So seeing it actually take up an interest in doing anything for us inside of the village is a nice change of pace, but unfortunately, not one you're going to find inside of the base game. What's the best way to get sugarcane? Well, this user might have the right idea, and it's cheap too. See, when you etch out a design like this in the ground and then place one block of water in the center, the water will space out evenly throughout the canal. And that, folks, lets us plant our sugarcane at maximum capacity. So if you're playing something like Skyblock where you need to be real picky on how you use your water, this might be a way to cut back without slashing your paper profits. In some of the oldest versions of Minecraft, it was possible that if you pressed the F7 key, you were able to take isometric screenshots, which are really cool to see. It's such a letdown that this feature doesn't exist anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was plenty of times that it would glitch out and miss things out of the chunks. But also, look me in the face and tell me it wouldn't be cool to scroll through your feed and see your friends show off their builds in this way instead of just the regular FOV 30, full draw distance, shaders on. It would definitely stick out. And if I accidentally press this key to take a screenshot, it'd at least be funnier to look back at. Since when I just press a screenshot with F2, it looks the exact same as how I remember it. I'm not even getting a different angle. One of the oldest rules in Minecraft is that you should never dig straight down. But that old rule is really just old hat. Since when you crunch the numbers like Mumbo Jumbo did, you notice that over 64% of the time that you dig straight down, nothing's gonna happen. You're not gonna fall into lava, you're not gonna fall into a cave and break your legs, just nothing. And if you want to increase those odds to even better chances of survival, what you could always do is stand in between two blocks like this and then mine down one after the other. So then if you notice that one of the blocks drops down into a ravine or lava, you'll still be standing on the other block. And at that point, if you don't correct your mistake, you deserve to fall into lava. In the transition from Minecraft 1.12 to 1.13, Mojang removed numerical IDs for a lot of features in Minecraft. This was referred to as the flattening. And if you've ever wondered why a lot of technical players choose to play on 1.12, that's partially for this reason. Since back then, you were able to change the color of sand or concrete using only redstone, which is pretty cool. But this also got rid of helpful features like being able to have a water or lava flowing source, or a stagnant source. Both were in there as separate IDs. And I've always wanted to be able to hold a portal block in my hand like we can on Bedrock. Without these numerical IDs, that's just not possible. And it's unfortunate, especially as we're able to turn on admin developer tools inside of our creative menu. If we can have a debug stick, we can have this other stuff, is all I'm saying. Building in Minecraft can be a rewarding task, but it also has its tedious parts. And while the fill command can help with that some, it's usually just good for filling in rectangles or cubes. Or so you thought, because apparently we can also use it for more complex patterns as well. As this Reddit user shows off, start by turning off the item drops and then fill from the second layer up with carpet. And then when you change that carpet back to your block of choice, you'll notice that the pattern only stayed where it was stacked, and the empty space is left that way. And while it's still a far cry from proper world edit tools in vanilla, this might save you some valuable time on the next project. Did you know mobs can't kill you if you hide in sugarcane? Well, that's not true, but it used to be. Since apparently back before the 1.9 snapshots, there existed an old bug where if you stood inside of a sugarcane stalk like this, the mobs wouldn't try to hunt you down. But unfortunately for us and our sugarcane, that's been changed. Which makes sense, it's one of the more transparent blocks you can stand inside. If the zombies couldn't track you down through that, I would doubt their eyesight. Glow squids are the only mob in Minecraft that have any form of glow, except for in the trailer for the Buzzy Bees, where we see the red eyes glow of the killer rabbit. I mean, for one, we don't even have killer rabbits still in Minecraft, so it's weird to have any kind of red glowing eyes inside of this trailer, especially when they're attributed to different rabbit variants. Like here in the bottom right of the trailer, that's not a white rabbit, so I don't know why it's still got the creepy eyes in this version. Ever since 1.9, there's been an old myth about the elytra that the further and faster that you flew with it, that would actually correspond to how much damage it's taking, when in reality, it's much simpler than that, since the truth is just that 1 second of flight time equates to 1 durability point on your elytra. So when you get the Unbreaking enchantment on your elytra, it'll just lower that chance of the elytra to drop durability every second. And now there's only a 25% chance for it to take damage every second. Long before pistons were ever added into vanilla Minecraft, there did exist a mod back in the day called, quite simply, the Piston mod. I'll give you one guess what it did. And though they beat Mojang to the punch, these pistons look quite a bit differently to what we're used to. They were completely white in color, and if you activated them, they could launch both blocks and players. And it was because Mojang loved that piston mod so much that they would actually use a lot of the code for the mod to make their own pistons. A lot of fans were clearly very excited when we got the Caves and Cliffs update with changes to our world generation. And as we should be, it made the game a lot more impressive to play around with. But not every change to the game's world generation's been met so kindly. And in beta 1.8, a lot of players were not a fan of how the new worlds looked. Here, the plains biomes became incredibly flat, with little to no variation between the blocks or the height. And what was even worse is if you happen to have the misfortune to spawn in the middle of the ocean. When you don't have any trees nearby to get you off that survival island, you might as well just start a new seed. And for a while, an ocean would be a death sentence without a boat. And back then, boats weren't exactly easy to row around in either. And so it's amazing to see how far we've come in our world generation since then. After all, a big part of how you play the game just comes down to the seed that you're given, so when so many of them ended up being rotten, you could see how this was a clear downgrade to what there was before. When you're first getting into the villager market, it can be a real leg up to convert them to zombies first. Because let me tell you, that discount for curing could be a huge help towards your Emerald Beacon. Though to convert every villager, you're probably doing a lot of brewing, a lot of which is unnecessary. Let me explain. See, if you were to take your weakness potion and instead add a dragon's breath, then we can use that now lingering potion to make 8 arrows of our own, which will let us convert substantially more villagers in the future. And hey, on Bedrock, the return is even better, since we could just make a whole stack of tipped arrows from one cauldron. What's interesting to see in this trailer is that the Striders are giving off shadows cast onto the light source. While it is possible to cast a shadow on top of lava, it's not done through this method. And instead, you'd have to be playing in Bedrock Edition and have the mob on top of a slab, where then the game glitches out and it displays the shadow on top of the lava. But just a Strider like this, it's not going to block out that much light. Despite their shortcomings, Tridents are a lot of fun to use, and they're worth keeping on hand for the Riptide Elytra combo alone. But that's apparently not their only synergy. See, if we were to instead charge up our Trident and then switch to a sword as we launch out, that momentum will transfer over and we'll get something of a sword charge attack. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that's incredibly cool. So if you're looking for a fire aspect Trident, this might be the closest you're gonna get. Though I'd be remiss if I didn't warn that this method wears down the durability on both the Trident and the sword. So grab an Unbreaking book before the trial run. This design is cheap and it's gonna save you a lot of time, because trying to convert all of your concrete powder by hand is a lengthy process. But with just a simple setup like this, we use barely any redstone and get a fully automatic farm. All we need to do is have an observer facing where we're going to place our concrete powder, and then have that redstone output power a dropper to give us more concrete powder, at which point we can offhand the concrete powder and put the pickaxe to mine in our primary hand. Though if you're going to try this, I want to make 2 notes. One is that the reason we use mangrove planks here is because wood can't be quickly broken by pickaxes, so there's no risk about accidentally breaking your wall when you're getting into an AFK session. And then 2 is that it's actually better to use efficiency 4 for a pickaxe instead of efficiency 5 in this scenario, because a faster efficiency could desync the observer and then the system would double trigger. But don't worry, being a little slower here is not going to be an issue, considering that overall, this will save you a bunch of time. Usually, we change the color of beacon beams by using full glass blocks, which does work, but it's too expensive. Or rather, it's going to look expensive when you compare it to this. See, by using colorful glass panes, we can get the same effect. And considering we get 16 glass panes per 6 glass blocks, that gives us 16 opportunities to change the color of your beacon instead of the 6 that we just had. And plus, you can even hide those stained glass panes inside of the beacon beam, which I'd argue looks even better than the original option, meaning that in more ways than one, this should be the way that you're dyeing your beacons going forward. In addition to beating Mojang to the punch on the Elytra, OpenBlocks also had a scaffolding block before Mojang did, though the way they did it was a little different. Since in the modded version, it would also break down easily if you broke it with your fist, but even if you forgot about it, it would eventually break down over time, meaning no more ugly scaffolding left around your builds, regardless of how sure you are that you're gonna go finish it. When concrete powder comes in contact with water, it turns into concrete. That's not surprising, it's the way it's coded. But some players would lead you to believe that this also happens with the item itself. And so, if you took a stack of the concrete powder and threw it into a waterlogged cauldron, then you could convert the stack just like that. But unfortunately for us and our time, this doesn't work. And in fact, the concrete powder will only change if it comes into contact with water or waterlogged blocks. Not even rain or splash water bottles will have any effect. If you've ever used a lead inside of Minecraft, you're well aware of how easy it is to break one of these things if you're going too fast. And so it's funny to see that when the goat hits the llama inside of this trailer, the wandering trader goes with it. Yeah, in my experience, the lead would just break and I'd spend the next few minutes trying to search for it before it despawns. And it's a shame we don't have this kind of elasticity to our ropes, since if we could, then it would be a lot easier to carry mobs with this Elytra trick we've shown off in the past. Now this one's actually a double lie, where you'll have some people say that a lava bucket works just as well as a water bucket for an MLG, whereas others say that lava does nothing to dampen your fall at all. But the truth actually exists in between the two of them, since lava can actually break your fall. It's just, it works different than water. And for lava, it'll reduce your fall damage the more of it that you fall through. So if you were to fall from the minimum height to do lethal damage, if you had a lava bucket, you could actually use it to survive the fall. You'll just also be on fire. And I still wouldn't recommend doing this in the nether over something like a powdered snow bucket. That's a lot more versatile. Keeping your animals in the pen can be a real pain, so to cut back on materials and still keep them in place, try this pattern. Apparently, when you place down fence posts diagonally, it still keeps the animals in. This is because the animals are registered to be 1 block wide, but using them diagonally goes less than that space, which will prevent our animal friends from leaving. But if you build this, just keep in mind, the babies are still able to escape. So if you do this, just make sure to look out for the little rascals. Why do so many players still play on version 1.8.9? Now, it's not because they don't like Elytras, and definitely not because they don't like the sniffer, but the real reason is that with the combat update, Minecraft's combat changed a lot, but whether it changed for the better, it's a matter of interpretation. And while I do think that there's arguments to be made that we shouldn't be spam clicking and instead moving over to a more methodical method, the idea that you're no longer able to block with swords like we could in the past, that's something that I do miss. Granted, shields were added in, but considering the fact that Mojang's still looking into making combat changes in later experimental snapshots, I think it's safe to say that even they realized that they didn't hit the nail on the head with this update yet. And it's not like it exactly made it more balanced either. I mean, now stone axes deal more damage than diamond swords. So there was a new meta, but is it a better meta? I have to disagree. As much as it pains me to say this, we're not able to pet mobs inside of Minecraft, which makes it even more hurtful when you see Steve doing just that inside of this trailer. Picks up the pet frog, sets it onto his lap, and then even goes one step further to pat it on the head. Oh, and also they're sitting on blocks too, which is something we just don't have the option to do without a server plugin. And I don't know about you, but I'm almost annoyed to have this pointed out to me, because now I can see that Mojang's considered letting us pet our frog pets, but yet it's still not in the game. I mean, come on, with adding in all the different wolves in the Armored Paws update, that seems like it would have been a layup to let us pet wolves at least. Here's how you can use 8 trapdoors to completely ruin an ancient city. No joke, if we place down our trapdoors like this and then flip them up to have a fence, then once we get the warden to summon from a skull catalyst, we can lead it inside and its pathfinding won't be able to find a way out of the blocks, at which point it's trapped. Now we can move on to phase 2, which is that even though the warden spawned, it's not going to be able to attack us, so we can use that as safety and then go and destroy the other parts of the ancient city, including the skull catalyst that originally spawned that warden. And then eventually the warden will despawn and we'll be able to explore the rest of this ancient city without worrying about hearing this ever again. And trust me, that's a weird weight off your shoulders. It's not possible to carry mobs inside of Minecraft. I mean, I guess you could put bees inside of a beehive and then silk touch it, but with the way that it's happening here in the Craft Your Path trailer, definitely nothing like this exists inside of our game. Or at least it doesn't in most updates. Since oddly enough, in the one block at a time snapshot, Mojang actually did add it in where you were able to carry chickens and even fly with them over your head like this. But unfortunately for us, this isn't Zelda. We're not just able to bring any chicken that we find down into Eldritch Horrors down below. This might look like a hopper, but it's actually a chute, which is just one of the many different blocks in Buildcraft that went on to inspire the way that we move our items in Minecraft. But what's even more interesting about the Buildcraft chute is that it actually was called the hopper, but changed the name when Minecraft used it in the vanilla release. I guess that would get pretty confusing, but it also makes the inspiration pretty clear to see. There's an old rumor that if you give your fish a water breathing potion, that'll help them to not suffocate when they're up on the surface. But as we're unfortunately going to see from this little fish, that's a straight up lie. And this most likely stems from the fact that potions of healing and harming have the inverted effect on undead mobs. So with that logic, if the water breathing potion helps us breathe underwater, maybe it could also help the creatures of the water breathe. But no, this is a tragic mistake in more ways than one. Piglins in the Minecraft trailers have terrible aim. Really, it's like looking at people who learned how to shoot by watching Stormtroopers. It's just terrible. And in the 1.19 update trailer, they're clearly shooting at Alex, but they're clearly shooting nowhere near her. And unfortunately for us, the piglins in-game have a much better shot. And that's not even tied to the difficulty that we use. It's really just that they're coded with better AI. But considering they're not wearing much armor at this point in the trailer, I get it. I also wouldn't want to have my main character die 11 seconds into the show. Just show a lifeless corpse for the rest of the trailer. Doesn't seem like a good way to sell the new update. With just a lever and some redstone dust, we're able to lag the game so much that we can basically freeze time. Since with the way that Mojang's coded redstone dust, it gets pretty laggy when you connect a bunch of these up to a lever. And then by using something like the fast right-click feature in a mod like Tweakaroo, we can flip that same lever on and off until eventually the redstone's updating so much that we basically slowed time down to a crawl. And then that's where the fun begins. Since one of the easiest tricks to pull off with this is to break bedrock. Or if you wanted to, you could use this to freeze time on a multiplayer server, build an entire structure, and then, when time switches back to normal, your friend will have no idea where that came from. But let me warn that in that case, you don't want to span the lever for too long, since doing it for longer than 60 seconds might just trigger Minecraft's watchdog to terminate the server. But as long as you freeze time in smaller increments, they'll be none the wiser. Before we had ender chests in the game, they existed in this mod called Ender Storage, which with this version of it, we had a new chest that was added to the game that added 3 different color-coded options. And with those different colors, you could choose which one that your ender chest was linked to. So 2 chests of different colors couldn't link together like this. Almost like using different channels on a radio station, or some other reference that makes more sense for people born in this century. And while we didn't get the same implementation of that when we got our ender chest in 1.3, we did get some form of color coding when we got shulker boxes in 1.9. So there you go, this one's a twofer. This brief moment in a Minecraft trailer is still burned into some player's memory. And the reason for that is this bit of blue dust in the background. And with just those few frames, players went wild with theorizing. Maybe it was some blue alternative to redstone, or a new thing like cobalt. But more likely is that it could have been some unused form of the blue dye, since in this update there was a lot of changes made to the dyes that we had. And key among those is making lapis lazuli no longer used for blue dye, but rather you have to craft it into a separate item. And given the fact that it's the cleric throwing it out and they're used to using lapis, that seems more likely in my head. Did you know you can kill the wither using just 8 dripstone? Sure enough, as you can see from this Razeworked video, all we need to do is summon the wither, trap it in a lava bucket like so, and then build up 40 blocks high. And once we're up there, we can look down at the wither and use a trapdoor and our dripstone spikes to eviscerate through its health bar. I mean, it'd be impressive to kill the wither this fast using regular enchanted tools, let alone no tools at all. And don't worry about the nether star catching fire in the lava, because if you place it like this, we can even have a hopper inside that makes sure that the item doesn't burn, keeping this design cheap, yet 100% effective. TNT duplication machines are great, but getting slime blocks and coral early on is a real tough business. So instead, we can take after this user's design and make an easy early game cobble farm. Since by supplementing our build with a lot more observers, we're able to glitch out the TNT just the same and essentially duplicate it for all our uses. And then with enough cobblestone generators packed into the inside of the blast chamber, this is a fully automatic way to get loads of cobblestone, which will be handy because as soon as you do get a silk touch pick, you're really not going to get a lot more cobblestone from that point, so better to stock up while you can. In the trailer for 1.15, you can see an iron golem holding out a poppy to a villager, which will still happen, but the only thing is that the villagers never seem to care about it anymore. Because with all the buggy changes they're added in 1.14, one of those is that the villagers will never take the poppy when it's given to them. And apparently Mojang didn't get the memo that they broke this in the last update, since even after it stopped working in 1.14, it made it into this trailer for 1.15. Depth Strata could obviously help you move faster in water, so what about lava? Unfortunately, even if you drink a fire resistance potion to test this out, there's no difference that comes from wearing these boots or not. And that means slugging through the nether is going to be just this slow, regardless of how you do it. When our characters get shot in the 1.21 update trailer, you'll realize that any residual arrows are rendered as sprites instead of the entities that we see in game. And because of that, we're able to see the white parts of the arrowhead sticking out of Kai when they get shot. Whereas in game, it looks arguably more painful, with the arrows actually fully submerged inside of the character. In the trailer for the Trails and Tales update, we see Steve diving into the water to find some of the new Tide armor trims. But when he dives down, he gets noticeably close to the pufferfish, enough for it to puff up, which if Minecraft's taught us anything, that also means that Steve would get poisoned. No amount of cool looking armor's gonna change that. When you have an elytra equipped and you start flying down, you feel like you're going at terminal velocity. And while you will find it terminal when you hit the ground and lose all your items, the truth is that you fall the same speed that you would without the elytra at all. Really, it's just the angle of the player model that makes you think this. And with or without an elytra, you'll find that the max terminal velocity for a player falling is 78.4 blocks per second. 13 seconds into the Tricky Trials update trailer, we can see a rendering error where they had it where the chest opens but leaves the lock on the bottom, instead of the way that it happens in game where the actual white part of this lock lifts up the top part of the chest. And even later in that same trailer, it's animated correctly. It just seems like something that slipped past. But with how much is going on in screen in just this one shot, I get it. One of the most recent lies in Minecraft is that the ancient city actually has a giant portal that can be lit. But regardless of how many videos and thumbnails you've seen trying to say otherwise, that's just not the case. But Mojang didn't help themselves here, since for a brief time in the files of the snapshot, they actually did refer to the structure as a portal. And at that point, you're just begging for people to theorize about it. So it's not true, but who knows, maybe it was supposed to be. When Steve and Alex die in the Nether update trailer, notice that their stuff seems to vanish with them. But the answer here isn't as simple as using something like keep inventory. Since in that same trailer, when they come back to life at the respawn anchor, they're still missing all of their gear that they lost in the previous shot. And because they respawn, they're not on hardcore mode. I guess they're just playing on some rare difficulty that only exists within Mojang's rendering server. Now, this won't be a surprise, but an exploding creeper is not a welcome sight. Though, when you're at this point and the monster's already primed, how do we deal with it? Well, it might seem pointless, but the solution actually hinges around placing a block between your feet and the creepers, since the way that Minecraft calculates explosion damage is based off a ray cast between the source and the bottom of the player's hitbox. Meaning if we have a block to, well, block the oncoming damage, that will keep us virtually unscathed by the blow. And in my eyes, that's not too shabby for just a measly piece of cobblestone. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?